salient point, and I'm glad you raised that point, because the bigger question, of course, is to create a mutually beneficial atmosphere for large MNC retailers and local large retailers, as well as standalone hawkers and standalone mom and pop stores to grow without actually getting into a tug of war of sorts. Unfortunately, however, recent evidence has been a little worrisome. Devangshu, Dutta, how do we address this?
I think why there's this whole contention about the retail sector and the policy, we have to put that in context. Retail touches every life in the country, every life on the planet, right? It touches with the most sensitive products, like food products, for instance, which is a necessity of life, a basic necessity of life. So therefore, when you kind of get involved in that, it is a sensitive area from that point of view. Secondly, in the case of India, and India is not unique in this, world over this has happened, there is the contest between large and small, which has happened, which has unfolded in countries around the world. There's no reason why India should be unique. The fact is that in India, bulk of the businesses are small, and they're micro. They're not even small, they're micro. Therefore, if you recall, a few years ago, there was this whole hullabaloo about against Reliance, for instance, in some states, as Reliance was expanding its footprint. Today, it is against Amazon, Flipkart, etc. It's not against yes, of course, there's an issue of foreign versus local, but it's not just that. It's the small versus large. Why that happens? Because retail as a business is probably among the most distributive instruments you have for income and wealth. When you look at the economy, given the fact that it's touching everybody, and given the fact that you have the bulk of the businesses involved in it are small, you have a lot of interfacing going on between consumers who buy small and retailers who sell small quantities. The moment a large player steps into this mix, you have a disturbance in the competitive landscape, and that, I think, is something for the government to take care of in terms of managing the competitive landscape rather than putting artificial barriers, as Mr. Padmanabhan said, getting into the micromanagement of policy. If you can make sure that the competitive landscape is diverse enough, I think we can maintain a healthy mix. And there's, as Harminder said earlier, there's a place for everybody. There is a customer who will want to go only to a mall or only to a large retail store. There is a customer who will never step into that because they feel that there is added cost which I don't need to pay for. And they're both right in their own way.
So in many ways, it should not be a zero-sum game. So somebody's gain should not be somebody's loss. And the size of the pie should keep on increasing with a space for every small to large retailer to operate. And for consumers also, the choice remains ever expanding. Dr. Baru made the point about the power of Amazon and power of companies like Amazon, which are very global in their activity, in their operations. They command a lot of power because of the data that they acquire, and their market practices have been brought into question in various geographies, and India is no exception. Now, say for instance, if you take this particular case, Amazon, if you go by the sheer letter of the rule book of FDI in retail, Amazon will be on the wrong side of the FDI's rule book from multi-brand retail in this dispute, because by persona as well as by activity, Amazon is an online retail company. Assuming if the ruling goes in favor of Amazon, will this not be a mockery of India's FDI laws?
Sure. So I think, Gaurav, you asked an earlier question, and the first part of that question was about the strategy of Amazon to step into offline retail, and whether it was an intentional strategy or whether it was just a block move as far as competition was concerned. And I think that's where an issue, a problem is. This whole divide between online and offline is artificial. Retail is one business. You have different formats, different channels, and companies adopt different channels depending on whatever their strategy may be. The question about whether Amazon will want to step into offline is already answered. Amazon is already offline. They acquired a very large company in the US, which was a clear intent, not even starting with Greenfield. They just acquired an existing company, right? And that kind of speaks to that point about the artificiality of this divide. And therefore, any regulation which seeks to divide the retail business into this online offline world and kind of what we've seen in the last several years. And then you kind of link it to FDI, saying FDI will be allowed in this, that, and the other. There is bound to be non-compliance, and this case is not unique. Again, there are plenty of other cases which anywhere you've had FDI in retail, I can guarantee you there would have been some non-compliance or the other. It's not possible for any company to be 100% in compliance of the law as it stands. It just takes a little bit of digging. So that means that we have bad law. One is intent. One is the intent to dominate and use every every weapon in your arsenal to dominate the market. The second is you have a bad law. Now let's fix those laws. And I think we do need to ensure that these loopholes which have been created are, it's really, it's a tangled mess, and you have a loophole in the middle and somebody wants to get through that. Just untangle the whole thing and say, this is how we go. Or you do what China did, which I don't think is possible in India. When China opened up to FDI, they said, you cannot hold more than 26%, and we will allow you to do business in these, whatever, 5, 6, handful of cities. And you cannot go outside of that. And then they incrementally allowed foreigners to own more and more, share and more, expand their business. But that gave enough runway for the domestic companies to build scale, which was what they wanted. So there was strategic intent on the government's part, on the political party's part, on the business's part, to make sure that Chinese business dominates. We missed that bus, that boat has sailed. Let's not even go there. So we need to create a landscape which allows as much as possible, and policy capture happens again across the world. It's not again something which is unique to India. Large companies dominate policy, that we know that happens. But if we can create a space, if we can create a landscape where small businesses can survive and thrive, you will ensure that there is healthy competition, because the market leads. Policy doesn't lead, the market leads. And if you can ensure that there is healthy competition, large companies will compete amongst themselves, but there will be enough small competition as well.